So, well, I'm hoping that you've got lots of questions and maybe some of the things, particular details about what the convoy was like that you're interested in, you could ask me about. We can have more of a kind of discussion after. I really wanted to focus on outlining what the mission was really, you know, the context for the mission, why we were going, and what I think we achieved. So we know the siege is not an isolated or a unique phenomena in Israel's and Palestine's relationship in the history of Palestine. It's not the only crime against the Palestinians. It's part of an ongoing 60-year war and genocide waged against the Palestinians by Israel. And as Jack Shapiro said there, you know, it started in 1948 with the Nakba, when, you know, thousands and thousands of Palestinians were forced out of their homes at gunpoint and became refugees. And those refugees are still living around the edges of Palestine, Israel, in Syria, in Jordan, in Lebanon, in refugee camps. 60 years they've been in temporary accommodation, waiting to be allowed to go home. In 1967, the rest of Palestine was occupied. More refugees were created. You know, the ethnic cleansing in 1948, the occupation in 1967, these were also crimes. The settlements that Israel built on illegally occupied land, those are crimes. Jews-only road, those are illegal. You know, the buffer zones they create around every road and every settlement, all of these things are crimes, internationally condemned, recognised as criminal acts. The land grabs, the stealing of water and resources, bulldozing of farms and olive groves, shooting of fishermen, you know, trying to catch fish, controlling of Palestinian airspace and borders, the racism and the two-tier system within Israel itself towards Palestinian people who live there, the settlement, the separation wall that's been built in around the West Bank. All of these things are crimes. All of these things have been condemned by the international community in the UN. So the siege of Gaza is not the only crime, but it's a particularly heinous crime, because over the course of recent Palestinian history, more and more people, more and more refugees have been forced into this tiny area, which now has steel walls all around it and the sea on the other side. And essentially they've been sealed into this area, and the siege has been imposed for 3.5 years, ever since the Palestinians had the cheek to elect a government that wasn't to the liking of Israel, Britain and America. And there's been, ever since the siege started, there's been a steady reduction of the type and quantities of aid and supplies that are allowed into Gaza. And this kind of collective punishment, even before last year's bombardment, you know, this is a really, really heinous crime against the people of Palestine. And what the bombardment did was exacerbate it 1,000 times. Because the siege has continued since the bombardment, since that massacre of 1,400 people and the ruination of the infrastructure and the decimation of the agriculture and the kind of all the public buildings in Gaza. Since all of that was destroyed, no materials have been allowed in for rebuilding. Something like 95% of the water in Palestine is now undrinkable. And it's, you know, that kind of indiscriminate punishment against 1.5 million people. Half of the people in Gaza are children, you know, and it's the children, it's the old people, it's, you know, pregnant mothers. These are the people who are the most vulnerable. You know, now after this amount of time, you know, since a year since the bombardment, you know, the sewage system isn't working, the electricity system doesn't work properly, the water is poisoned. With poisoned water, what little agriculture there's left, the food that can be grown is bad. You know, so it's getting more and more into everything, making life more and more impossible for people, and there's more and more disease of all kinds and malnutrition as a result. Our media, they were forced into talking about the war crimes during the bombardment. They were forced into it because they were so blatant, and the evidence was all over the internet, all over the world. It would have been impossible for them not to talk about it. But they don't talk about the siege. They don't talk about the fact that it's still going on, that it's tightening. And so the context for the Viva Palestina Convoy really was, yes, to take some aid that's desperately needed, particularly medical aid, into Palestine. But just as importantly, to bring attention to the siege, to the fact that the siege is still going on. They talked, the Viva Palestina organisers, about being a protest on wheels. We drove. Initially, when we left Britain, we were 100 vehicles. By the time we got to Gaza, it was nearly 200. And every one of those vehicles was decorated. I had some photos for you, but we can't connect them, so sorry. Every one of those vehicles was decorated with flags, with the Palestinian colours, with slogans. So everywhere we went, we were drawing attention to what's happening and having a chance to talk to people about, the siege and bring it into the media in those countries where the media was prepared to be interested. And also, of course, to break the siege, not just in the sense of, taking some stuff in, but, the symbolism, to take solidarity to the Palestinians, to break the isolation that's being forced on them, to boost their morale, to show them they're not forgotten, and to show Israel that the Palestinians aren't forgotten, and they won't be left to rot. Israel won't be allowed to just starve them out. So, the short story is, it took 5 weeks, but we did do it. And the Palestinians that we met in Gaza, they confirmed that it wasn't so much the aid as the solidarity that they really appreciated. The thing that really strikes you when you go into Gaza is, for a disaster zone, for a war zone, it's a very peaceful and civilized one. They have amazing dignity under this kind of horrendous duress. And what they really want from people, they want people to keep coming. They want people to make links with them. They want people outside to do what they can't do, which is to keep the story alive in the media, in the general population. They can't do that from where they are. That's denied to them. But they want us to do that. And everybody who goes there, that's the message they give them. We need your solidarity. We need you to be working for us outside. Not, we don't need to be seen as a refugee problem, as a charity case, but we do need your solidarity. We're struggling here, and we need the support of as many people as possible, and we need the story to not be forgotten. Finding ways to make connections and to break the isolation.